A lot of early improvisers would play that progression like this: G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7. It's nice and it's okay, but an experienced improviser would take a look at that and play G minor 9 11 to a C7 sharp 11 to an F major 7, and maybe even do something like this. Did you know that it's estimated that more than 97% of jazz musicians will fail at improvising? It's not surprising considering that players struggle with rhythm, harmonic complexity, melodic development. It's very common for musicians in the early stages of development to absolutely fail and give up on improvising. So in this video, I want to talk about the challenges that jazz musicians face when learning to improvise and exactly what you can do about it. And also in this video, I'm going to put these challenges in the order that you should be facing them. In other words, what should you be doing first, second, third, and so on. By the way, my name's Paul Tobey from Jazzmentl.com. Thanks for joining me for another one of my tutorials. Let's dive right in and tackle challenge number 1. I really feel that the biggest challenge that jazz musicians face when learning to improvise is understanding what rhythm really means in the context of improvising. And more specifically, I'm talking about swing. So let me give you an example of this. I went to the internet, it's not hard to find, and I call this swinging backwards. I want to play you an example of it. It's a very drastic example, but I want you to listen to it, and I'm going to explain what I mean by swinging backwards. Let's give it a listen. What you hear in this recording is something like this. You're going to have an eighth note and another eighth note. That's the way that swing is written. But what this person is doing is playing it more like this. A dotted eighth note with a 16th note. So you get a sound like this. That's not what you're looking for. If you sped that up, it would sound something like this. And of course, jazz is all about medium to up-tempo swing and playing solos using eighth notes. And if you sped it up, it would sound something like this. I mean, that just sounds hokey, and it is, because most musicians, especially in the early stages of improvising, just don't understand how to play swing or hear it. Swing is written like this. It's written with 2 even eighth notes, and the difference between the length of those eighth notes is this one is a little bit longer than the second one. Now, it's very marginal, and of course it depends on how fast the tune is. The faster the tune is, the more those eighth notes become even. But what really matters is the second note is a little bit louder than the first one. So even eighth notes, if we were playing this tune in the key of D, and of course we're working on the tune The Way You Look tonight, if you were to play a scale using backward swing, it sounds like this. If you were to play it with true swing, it would sound something like this. And that's almost even eighth notes. It's just the second note has a different feel. And the way that you really feel swing is on beats 2 and 4. So for example, if we were to put slashes in this bar, you would feel beats 2 and 4 more than you would feel beat 1 and 3. For example, when people clap, they clap on 1 and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's backward swing. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. And the reason why this is so important to feel swing is that when it comes to improvising, you're really thinking and feeling in eighth notes on the and of the beat, and you're also thinking in 2 and 4. Now, if we go back to the lead sheet, and I couldn't find one in the key of D like he was playing, this is in the key of F. If you were to solo backwards, it would sound really hokey, something like this. It's always going to feel like it's not swing, like it's some sort of, I don't know, stride piano or something like that. What you're really looking for from swing is a sound like this. And that's not an easy thing to do. My fingers over time have adjusted themselves to that feel, and they're playing more bebop style licks because that's what's natural for that feel. So I'm going to take you back to this video that I found online. This person is about to solo. And what I want you to listen for is the fact that they have no context for right hand lines because the feel is completely missing. So what it ends up being is some random notes that make no sense in terms of feel. Let's listen to it. So I think you can actually hear that. So what you have is, this kind of backward swing, and then random stuff. Good bebop lines we'll talk about a little bit later in this video because it's very important to understand that. But if you were to play proper lines, it would sound more like. You get the idea. So without that understanding of feel, you'll never get to the part where you're a proper and excellent sounding improviser. Hey, I really hope you're enjoying the video and getting some good value out of it. If you are, just reach down and hit the little thumbs up button while you're here. It really helps us set the channel. And if you'd like to subscribe, we'd love to have you. The next big challenge that early improvisers face when learning to improvise in jazz is understanding what we call modern harmonic progression. It's essentially chord movement. How does one chord move to the next, and what is the quality of that chord? There is, of course, in traditional harmony, major and minor chords, and sometimes seventh chords. In jazz harmony, there's minor seventh chords, minor 7 flat 5 chords, there's extensions on those. So what does that all mean? Let's take a look at the sheet music for the way you look tonight. And if you look at the first 4 bars, you've got an F major 7th chord, a D minor 7th chord, G minor 7, and C7. Now, early improvisers might understand what those chord symbols are, but they don't necessarily understand what's available in that chord and how that chord is spaced in order to give it a very powerful jazz sound. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's take a look at an F major 7th chord. You can write it like this, a 7 with a circle, and in the lead sheet it was like this, major 7. They both mean the same thing. And in the key of F, that means 1, 3, 5, and 7. And then that's pretty much the extent of harmony for most beginners, but you've got extensions on top of that. So you've got the 9th, the 11th, which is a B flat, and the 13th. Now, this note is not typically available because if you go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then the 11th, or the B flat, creates a flat 9 with the 3rd of the chord. It's a very harsh interval. So this sounds bad. You can't really do that.
But what you can do is you can raise it by a half step, making it what we call a sharp 11. And so it's this chord, which is actually quite nice. And then the 13th on top. That's just one example of understanding chord symbols and the extensions that are available to them. Then the other big thing is, well, how do those chords and those extensions interact with each other? Therefore, in the song The Way You Look Tonight, we take a look at the first 4 bars and analyze that from a chord progression standpoint. You've got 1, major 7, 6, minor 7, and of course these are coming from the notes of the scale. In an F major 7 scale, D is the 6th. And then you've got 2 minor 7 and then 5 7. Now this one is fairly common in jazz. You've got a 2 5. You've probably heard that before. So let's do that progression with the melody. Now that's fairly simple, and early improvisers might understand how that works. More seasoned improvisers or even intermediate improvisers would toss out the minor 7th chord and put more chords in. They would go to B flat here and then a 2 5 of G. So A half diminished 7th to D7, which then leads to the G minor, and then over here on C7 you would put a flat 9 there. So the progression goes from this to this. You hear the difference between those two? And of course, that's where improvising starts, because now you've got more chords giving you the ability to track those chords through your solo lines, like this. If you were to take a look at the last 2 bars, that G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7, that's a 2 5 1. A lot of early improvisers would play that progression like this: G minor 7 to C7 to F major 7. It's nice and it's okay, but an experienced improviser would take a look at that and play G minor 9 11 to a C7 sharp 11 to an F major 7, and maybe even do something like this, which is inner voices. And that's what separates those that succeed at improvising from those that don't. It's understanding how chords move to each other, the intervals between each of the notes of those chords, the extensions that are available, and the inner voices and the interaction from one chord moving to the other. Okay, the last thing I want to talk to you about in this video, and probably the biggest reason why most improvisers fail, is because they do not understand or learn the bebop language. So what is the bebop language and why does that matter? Well, let's go back to our lead sheet for The Way You Look Tonight. If you take a look at the first 4 bars, it's 1, 6, 2, 5, back to 1. We've already discussed modern harmonic progression for jazz, and that means adding extra chords. So we're moving from 1 to 4, to 3, to 6, to 2. And likely what most improvisers do in the beginning is they think scales, because that's pretty much what's taught in school and a lot of the videos that you see online. So you'll see things like this: a scale, and then they'll connect it to another scale for another chord. So like this. And that's a good place to start. Now, the bebop language is different. What it does is it connects scales and chords with what we call passing notes or enclosures. And it creates a language. And that language is something you must learn. It's like phrases and sayings. And that's bebop. It's like this language was developed by players over time, and you have to learn little phrases and sayings from that language. So for example, instead of a scale, you've got a chord, and then some enclosures leading to the next chord, another chord, enclosure, and then a scale. Get the idea? That's a language you must learn. And if you don't learn it, then your improvisational skills will always be lacking. Let's play that line one more time. Hopefully I can remember what I did. And that's what makes the bebop language. So let's turn that sheet music off. And what I want to finish with is just playing over the way you look tonight with these types of bebop lines. Right? I mean, that's a language you have to learn. It's not something that you can say, oh, there is a way to skip that. I don't need to learn that language. Well, you need to, because that's what's going to make you a great improviser. And everything that we've talked about today, the swing rhythms, the modern harmonic progression and the way chords are put together, and then finally the bebop language, all of that is the reason why most people fail. It's probably more than 97%. It's because nobody wants to take the time to do that. But if you have it in your soul and you have the time and you really want to put in the effort, then one day you'll wake up and you'll be a great improviser.
If you are in the early stages of developing as an improviser, I highly recommend you check out my 10-part video course. It's called The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Jazz Piano. It's 100% free, and you can get the first video in that series right here.